Well, ladies and gentlemen, India has not only given a strong rebuttal to what it has called Canadian insinuations against India's Home Minister Amit Shah, but also has called the representatives of Canada and warned of serious consequences of the absurd and baseless allegations for bilateral ties. This comes 2 days after Canada leaked information to Washington Post alleging that Amit Shah was behind the campaign of targeting Khalistani separatists in Canada. India, in fact, has also accused Canada of harassment and violation of diplomatic conventions for keeping India's consular officials under audio and video surveillance, also intercepting their communication. Despite the law between the two countries, the relations have only further nosedived as Canada has labelled India as an adversary, accusing it of espionage and surveillance, clubbing it with countries like Iran and North Korea. Well, between all of this is the Indian diaspora in Canada, close to 770,000 Sikhs in Canada, close to 2% of Canada's population. In fact, you have at least a 1.4 million strong Indian diaspora in Canada alone, close to at least 4% of Canada's population. And remember, nearly 3 lakh Indian students are in Canada. This is according to 2021. And in fact, Indians constitute the largest group of international students in Canada, accounting for almost 40% of the total international students, contributing to $4.9 billion strong worth to the Canadian economy. And this is according to the 2021 data. Let's just look at what all of this means, not just for the two countries, for the very strong Indian diaspora. I'm being joined by Daniel Bodman, who's a Canadian journalist, Prabhu Dayal, who's a former ambassador, as well as Professor Madhav Nalapat, who's a vice chancellor for the Manipal Advanced Research Group. Thank you very much, all three of you, for joining us. A Diwali weekend, but a Diwali which may have very different reverberations in Canada, as it were. Let me just come to you first, Mr. Prabhu Dayal. How do you look at this, Ambassador? How do you look at what's happened between Canada and India, particularly strong rebuttal by India? How is the messaging going also for the Indian diaspora?
Well, let me categorically state that I think that Justin Trudeau has destroyed India-Canada relations because of his short-sighted and immature vote bank politics. As we all know, India-Canada relations have now sunk very low, and in fact, they have hit rock bottom, particularly after Canada alleged that India's Home Minister, Mr. Amit Shah, was behind the assassination of some Khalistanis in Canada. Now, the government of India has strongly rejected these preposterous imputations and ascribed them to the political agenda of the Trudeau government, which is centered around vote bank politics. At the same time, Canada has said that some of India's consular officials were under audio and video surveillance. And of course, India termed it as a violation of the conventions. Let me mention that Article 31 of the 1963 Vienna Convention on Consular Relations states that consular premises shall be inviolable and the authorities of the receiving state shall not enter any part of the premises. So if the Canadian authorities have put any sort of video or audio listening devices, then that's a violation of this article. Again, Article 35 of this convention says that the freedom of communication of the consular premises would be very important. It says the receiving state shall protect and permit freedom of communication on part of the consular post for all its purposes. And the official correspondence of the consular post shall be inviolable. So again, if they have done some snooping on what the communications of the Indian consulate are, then again, it's a violation of this convention. So let the details come out, but I think the Canadians have been going too far in order to establish that India has overstepped the boundaries. And this is happening because the Canadian side is led by Justin Trudeau, who's playing vote bank politics and dancing to the tune of some extremists like Jagmeet Singh Dhaliwal, who are staunch Khalistan supporters. And the government of Justin Trudeau has not paid any attention to the request of the Indian government to extradite the extremist Khalistanis. Instead, it has continued to dance on the tune which people like Dhaliwal have played.
Daniel Bodman, if I can get you in. Daniel Bodman, what's really happening? How is Canada looking at all of this? We have discussed this before as well, but a lot has happened since then. There are some very strong allegations. In fact, India has rebuffed all of them very strongly, unequivocally, officially. But the fact remains, the official line that now seems to be have taken by Canadian authorities has also raised certain questions, including how the consular officials of India are being treated, if at all they are under surveillance, as is being claimed.
Yeah, so there's two Canadas, really, and one of them is very anti-India. So you have the establishment Canada, we'll call it, right? The Liberal Party sees itself as sort of the governing party of Canada in perpetuity. That's sort of the idea of the Liberals. And there's a bunch of apparatuses that are essentially part of the Liberal Party, which is the CBC, the national broadcaster, the Toronto Star, CTV, Global News, and a lot of the mainstream outlets. And those that see themselves as part of the Canadian establishment, you can see part of these security agencies, are very, very dead set on the India thing. It's a thing that they're going on. You could say, is this to distract from the Chinese foreign interference, this, that, and whatever. But it seems to be a high priority. Conversely, though, this story doesn't seem to really have hit the heart of Canadians in any meaningful way. No, this isn't an issue Canadians care about, right? Oh, even if they watch the CBC, they know, oh, a Sikh activist was killed outside of Gurdwara. I guess that's bad. But there are much bigger problems in the country that people want dealt with, right? So mass migration. And it's sort of, it kind of goes counter because you have a lot of Canadians who are now sort of fed up with the liberal, you could say, vote bank politics. Everyone kind of knows it's the pandering or whatever. So when they see this story, it kind of gets caught up in all this, and people don't really know what to feel about it because the way it's covered in Canada, a good story on India-Canada relations will have about 30% of the story's facts in it. That's a good story in Canadian media. So just not even the full Canadian perspective is said, and maybe 1% of the Indian perspective. So there's a good amount of confusion. So the people, I'd say, don't really care. However, those within the establishment and those in the halls of power, they seem to be pushing this hard. Interesting enough, Ursula Desange just came in the National Post, former Liberal minister, and recalls talking to Justin Trudeau in 2008, 2011, when they were both sitting MPs together. And he outright called him in the National Post. He said, he's an idiot. He's an imbecile. You can quote me on that. And he said, Justin Trudeau believes that all Sikhs are Khalistanis, and he believes in this sort of exotic, noble, savage type immigrant, where when a Sikh comes in, and if a Sikh
I get your point.
amalgamates Canadian values, they're more boring, right? So they want the more exotic, quite frankly, terrorists to be represented because that makes them better people. Because if Justin Trudeau, if anyone can embrace a Sikh person who says, yeah, I love Canada, I'm here to get a job and raise a family and get educated, that's boring. But if you embrace a Sikh person who came to make Khalistan and get revenge and do all this stuff, crazy stuff, well, if you can embrace him, then you are more tolerant. And this seems to be what has dictated Liberal policy going forward.
Professor Madhav Nalapat, when I was introducing this show, I spoke about the Diwali weekend and possibly a Diwali weekend with many shades for those who possibly are in Canada or the relatives that are in India. And I'm asking this also because there were supposed to be festivities with the Indian diaspora, which was also cancelled. And then you have a low between India-Canada, which suddenly seems to nosedive even more. Amid all of this, whether it be the Sikhs, whether it be the other Indian diaspora, including students, especially with what happened with the Diwali festivities getting cancelled, Is there a cautionary note that this needs to be looked at with for ordinary citizens, for
Well,
civilians?
Sneha, first of all, I'd like to point out that thank you for the promotion, but I'm not the Vice Chancellor of Manipal University. We have Lieutenant General Venkatesh, who is the Vice Chancellor, Dr. Venkatesh, and he's doing an outstanding job. I'm the Vice Chair of the Manipal Advanced Research Group, which is quite different. Having said that, I want to say that Justin Trudeau is working to a plan. I mean, comparing India, for example, with North Korea, with Iran, North Korea, I mean, we all know what North Korea is. Iran has been funding the axis of resistance in inverted commas, which basically seeks to eliminate the state of Israel, and along with that, much of the Jewish people. Now, is India seeking to eliminate the state of Canada and to eliminate the people of Canada? Of course not. If at all there's a watch being kept, it's being kept on elements which are being tolerated by the present government, which are related to terrorist activities in India that have so far killed hundreds and hundreds of people, and who are daily going on television and threatening to kill more. And they're celebrated in Parliament. They're celebrated in the media. We just don't understand it. There's a big difference between trying to look at terror networks inside a country and then, basically, talking in terms as though that country is running a terrorist network in Canada, which is rubbish, because there's no intention on the part of India to interfere in Canada's democracy. I want to say, Sneha, it's a ridiculous charge. The Home Minister, first of all, the High Commissioner, who I'm quite certain by service rules is forbidden from this kind of activity, even if it took place, which I don't agree it did. Now it's the Home Minister. It is ridiculous. I mean, in such a situation, the Home Ministry would be collecting evidence on terrorists, including this particular gentleman that Trudeau seems to be so fond of. And then that would be handed over to the Ministry of External Affairs, and the ministry would take it up. There's no question of the Home Minister being directly involved in any such activity. At the same time, Sneha, the problem we're facing today in 2024 is high technology. We are facing the problem of AI making very realistic fakes. Now, if students of Manipal Institute of Technology can, of course, they won't do that, but I'm saying that even students can produce AI-inspired video and audio. For example, of Justin Trudeau planning terror attacks on India. And then if India takes up those kind of videos and says, oh, you're planning attacks on India, you're the Prime Minister of Canada, it would be absurd. It's an utterly absurd charge to make that Home Minister Shah is involved, and the Indian system does not operate like that. The diplomatic system does not. The system would be that the Home Ministry is keeping track of threats to India, which is a very different matter from basically incentivizing terrorist groups to go after India and to kill lives, not only Indians, but hundreds of Canadians have been lost as a result of this K group. I won't call them Khalistanis. They're the K group. And as has correctly been pointed out, the overwhelming majority of Sikhs, including in Canada, are peaceful, law-abiding citizens, and they have nothing to do with the kind of hate and
No, I think, Professor Nalapat, while you're mentioning a very strong stand that India has taken, and of course, the possibilities of what you're talking about, Amit Shah, as well in terms of the AI and just the way how tech can be used in all of this is extremely strong. But Prabhu Dayal, Ambassador, if I can come to you. So, and this is the question that I also asked Professor Nalapat. With all of these relations nosediving every few days to further levels of low, the huge Indian diaspora that is in Canada, what's it at stake? How must the Indian diaspora and those in India who want to go to Canada as well, how should they be looking at this? What kind of a cautionary note really is there in it?
Well, before I answer your question, let me just take off from where Professor Nalapat left. He very rightly said that all Sikhs in Canada are not extremists and they are not supporting this entire movement of separating from India. Likewise, Sikhs here in
by
India
all means, definitely,
are among the most loyal and patriotic sections of India's population. And you can see how the performance of Sikhs has been exemplary in the context of the Indian Army. They have been the bravest soldiers and officers of the Indian Army. But there are a handful of exceptions who are extremist Sikhs, and they are the ones who are calling for the breakup of India and the creation of a sovereign state of Khalistan.
No, I think even to go into that whole
region.
tangent of saying Sikhs and a link of just Sikhs and Khalistani is also quite insidious for that matter, because it's a given, like it's just a handful who either would be Khalistanis or pro-Khalistani. So that's not even a line that I think we need to take in. It's a given. Sikhs are far beyond that. Sikhs are far more than that. Sikhs are as much as part of India as anyone else, and as much as patriots as it could be. So I think there's no two links between that whatsoever. But Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, to what I was asking.
Well, this effort by Justin Trudeau to malign India will definitely have an impact on all aspects of the relationship, including, of course, trade. But at the same time, certainly the interests of the Indian student community will be affected. For instance, there will be problems in regard to their travel. I understand from the feedback that I get from various other sources that the universities are not going to do anything which hurts the interests of the Indian students who are studying there. But there will be problems, as I said, in regard to their travel, for instance, when they want to come to India on home leave, whether they will get easy visa renewals or what sort of impediments they will face, if any. At the same time, the Indian community in Canada will become badly divided. As it is, the extremist Sikhs are targeting certain sections of the Hindu community. They have tried to put slogans there on the walls of Indian temples and tried to decry them. So there is going to be a certain fallout of this entire thing on the Indian Canadian community resident there, and it will have a divisive effect. Of course, this entire damage that Justin Trudeau and his government have done to India-Canada relations will not be easy to repair. And I think in the long term, the price that may have to be paid will be very considerable. Let me mention that, of course, both sides will pay the price to some extent. But for instance, as regards trade, we are a much bigger economy. Canada has so much more to gain out of us. The size of the Indian market is enormous, whereas the size of the Canadian market is very small. We will be able to source whatever we are buying from Canada from elsewhere. So the damage to our interests will be much, much less than what will be to the Canadian interests.
But let me just get Daniel Bodman to what you are saying. Daniel Bodman, so India has said such kinds of insidious insinuations are only going to force them and have dire consequences on the bilateral ties between the two countries. But does Canada care about it?
I mean, does Canada or Justin Trudeau? These are two different questions on the economy. Listen, there's one thing India can do to protect India.
At this point, quite frankly, it is Justin Trudeau. How does Justin Trudeau? I mean, when you talk about Justin Trudeau's decisions, it is Canada's decisions.
If you want to get back at Justin Trudeau, you shut down all Indian students coming in, all universities. And I don't like Indians are so extremely naive on what's happening in Western schools. There is no benefit for your children to be in Canada, for Canada or your kids. If they're going to a real school like McGill or TMU or U of T, they're learning to hate India. These schools are taken over by far left radicals that will teach them about the PFLP, or that's where they're going to learn Khalistan. Now, that's only a minority of your students. The majority of Indian kids are getting human trafficked into fake schools where they're ending up living in a basement and working Uber and then getting sucked into the Khalistani stuff on fake refugee passports to go and be radicalized even further. This is what is hurting the relationship here. And by the way, Trudeau shut down our entire resource economy. Okay, he doesn't care about the Canadian economy, and then our economy and our GDP is totally propped up by human trafficking and money laundering, which is on the backs of Indian students and their families. Why is it cheaper to get to Canada, the United States? Because most of it's a scam. You're being scammed. And then these kids are getting thrown into the Khalistan movement. Shut down the student visas. Stop sending $20,000 a year to Khalistanis and terrorists and gangsters under the guise of, I need my kids to get an education. Shut that down. The fake Canadian economy that Justin Trudeau will collapse instantly, and then he'll capitulate. And your kids will stop being radicalized in Canadian universities.
Okay, I'm running
That's
short
the
of
key.
time, but Professor Madhav Nalapat, I would want you to respond to what Daniel Boardman has said. Very, very strong words coming from him. But it'll be unfortunate if India and Canada have to go down that lane.
Sneha, I can tell you that the fundamental relationship is very strong. The Indian diaspora there, like the Indian diaspora in other parts of the world, UK, Australia, US, it's a very, very vibrant diaspora. It has got a significant contribution in terms of the GDP, a significant contribution to taxes. It's a model diaspora. And frankly, I'm not a doomsayer where India-Canada relations are concerned. Justin Trudeau is so out of line that is becoming evident to the Canadian people. His poll numbers are plummeting. Those of Jagmeet Singh are also plummeting, quite frankly, because I think Canadians don't want any truck with extremism. They don't want any truck with violence. And they're seeing too much of violence, too much of propagation of extremism, too much of drug trafficking going on in Canada. Daniel is perfectly right. These are the issues that need to be paid attention to. At the same time, India is a democratic country. No, it's not going to suddenly say, no, you're not allowed to go to Canada to study. No way. The student will, programs like yours, other programs, news, they will make up their minds whether they want to go to Australia or to Canada or the US or to Singapore or wherever. And I think these are good times for these other countries because Indian students more and more are coming to the conclusion that possibly Canada is not a safe place. But I would like to say I've been to Canada.
All right, I think
frankly,
we're totally out of time. Professor Nalapat, I think you're making some very important points. But at the end of the day, these are two countries, as you said, Professor, Canada and India, that have extremely strong ties historically and possibly unprecedented, almost. I mean, there have been precedents, but to such levels of relations, diving every few weeks is going to have strong bearings on people across borders as well. Daniel Boardman, Prabhu Dayal, as well as Professor Madhav Nalapat, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.